People on their telephones all the time, people on their iPads. It seems to me that cinema therapy makes a lot of sense. Having them watch videos of one thing or another, usually movies, can really give them an idea of what we expect them, how we expect them to act. The clients, I mean. So let's go ahead and start the second week. Next week we'll be finishing up cinema therapy. But right now I've got some research that they've done on cinema therapy. Mostly overseas, it seems to be popular in Eastern and Southern Europe. Cinema therapy does so. They've actually done studies. So we'll talk about some of those studies at the end of the chapter or at the end of the lecture. Sometimes the role models that clients need are unavailable in real life but can be found in films, and that's not a bad idea. If there isn't anybody that fits the mold that somebody needs, sure, go ahead and talk about Superman or Wonder Woman or Batman. Those are the people we have in the picture. But also Spider-Man, anyone, the Graduate from the 1968 movie. From the fictionalizer of the real worlds of business, sports, entertainment, history, politics, and religion, people have always shaped themselves by reference to larger-than-life characters. And talking to a lot of my students, a lot of your heroes and heroines are your relatives, are your elders. And I think that's a really positive thing. Role models may be larger than life, but to be believable, they must be similar to us in some respects. Family background, life experience, vocation, lifestyle, or in conflicts they face. And this, of course, is McLovin. And she's trying to determine if he's real. He's real. I can't remember how old he was, 25 or 26, I think. The primary issue in role model compatibility is whether clients can project themselves into a desirable character, seeing themselves as they have been, are today, or would like to become in the future. And that's not a bad thing to look at someone in a movie and say, I would like to be just like that person. One way to select a role model for a client is to conceptualize an ideal mentor and then choose a film that features such a character. It is recommended that role models who struggle with and overcome the same issues that the client faces will allow them to learn from a role model's experience. Clients can benefit from film characters' lessons, and this is the film I have over to the right is Field of Dreams, with starring Kevin Costner, but it also stars all the ghosts that come out of the corn. Now this is really kind of fascinating because the Field of Dreams is about 30 miles north of where I live. So if you watch Field of Dreams, we can't really see my house, but you can see the type of area that I live in. Lots of corn. I'll tell you, I've got corn to the north of me and corn to the south and east of me. So yeah. I don't, there's no corn to the west, but yeah, we're surrounded by corn, and it looks just like it does in the movie. And actually, we've been to the Field of Dreams in Dyersville. They played a baseball game there. I think only the one, maybe they played two. Anyway, they're going to play next year. They're building a Field of Dreams stadium there, so that should be interesting to see what Major League Baseball does with it. Dyersville is about 150 miles west of Chicago, so people from Chicago could come out and look at what corn looks like in Iowa. Clients may be influenced by a fictional role model's negative traits as well as his positive ones. A therapist can inoculate a client against inappropriate identifications by cautioning beforehand what not to take from the character. And this is, of course, Bridges of Madison County with Meryl Streep and Clint Eastwood. Madison County is about 120 miles to our west. It's over south of Des Moines. So I don't remember going through any bridges of Madison County, but we have driven through it when we've gone to the opera. So are there negative things in this movie, Bridges of Madison County? And the answer is yes, of course. She's married to somebody else, and Clint Eastwood comes, and she starts having an affair with him. Um, anyway, you probably would want to warn them. We're not suggesting that you have an affair with somebody, but it is a very positive movie, other than the fact, and she does stay with her husband, by the way. Ferris Bueller's Day Off. There are negative and positive traits about Ferris Bueller. It's one of my wife's favorite movies. Positive traits, he's got spunk. Everybody likes him. Everybody likes Ferris Bueller. He's good with computers. He has a great girlfriend. He's a good person. He takes care of his friends. Those are his positive traits. His negative traits, he lies. He tells lots of lies. He's conceited. He's manipulative. He makes fun of people. He burns bridges with people he might need in the future. And he's a little spoiled. Well, he's more than a little spoiled. He's real spoiled. Anyway, that's Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Everybody's favorite, well, my wife's favorite movie anyway. Dramatic role models can sometimes be preferable to real-life mentors. Real-life mentors often disappoint their proteges when they display human limitations. Role models in films may fall from grace, but then they work their way back, and all we see are the positive traits, and that's always a good thing. Clients learn that true heroes learn from their mistakes, and they can too. And this, of course, is Remember the Titans, movie about racial problems in Northern Virginia, in an area that we used to live around. We lived in Maryland, but where Remember the Titans took place was just south of where we lived. So this hit home pretty close. Anyway, Remember the Titans. They had to bring the white ball players, white football players, and the black ball players together in order to get them to become a football team, and they won the state championship. These therapeutic films should correspond to clients' narratives as closely as possible in terms of chronological age, socioeconomic background, education, values, and subject matter. That's going to be very difficult when we're dealing with American Indians. There aren't that many movies about indigenous people in the Americas or around the world, for that matter. Some clients are rigid and others may be more imaginative, which dictates which films will benefit each. Films should be selected to mirror the client in as many ways as possible. I'm guessing that none of you are in the Billionaire Boys Club. This is actually a true life story about a group of very wealthy teenage boys from Southern California who decided to band together to take over the world because they were so rich. They decided to pool their money and get into business together. They ran into a scam artist, an older scam artist, and one of them murders the scam artist. Young, handsome, and cunning. Research has shown that values shared between films and client are more critical than demographics. Mismatches may occur when therapists make film assignments that reflect their own values rather than their clients. And this is something that you have to be really, really careful about. Just because you have those ideas, you need to match the movie to your client, not to you. To prevent this from happening, therapists should bear in mind regional standards and should discuss potentially offensive aspects of a film before making an assignment. And of course, Monsters Ball, Billy Bob Thornton, Halle Berry, and Heath Ledger are in this movie, as well as Peter Boyle. And there's a lot of racism in the movie, but it's mostly coming from Peter Boyle and from Billy Bob Thornton until his son commits suicide, and that's Heath Ledger. There are sexual scenes in this movie, so if that is a problem, then you should probably stay away from this movie. In the end, everybody tries to get over. Billy Bob Thornton's trying to get over the suicide of his son. Halle Berry is trying to get over the death of her son and the death of her husband, who, as it turns out, Billy Bob Thornton was the guard who was there when her husband was executed. And of course, Peter Boyle. There is a racial difference between Halle Berry and Billy Bob Thornton, and Peter Boyle, of course, is very negative about anything that has to do with the races getting along. The subject matter of a film should match the presenting problem of client. A single film can be helpful to client with several different concerns. A film, When a Man Loves a Woman, deals with a woman struggling to recover from alcoholism, but it also deals with the relationship difficulties, stereotypic male-female roles, and dysfunctional communication. And that's primarily what takes place during this movie. It's the fact that Andy Garcia and Meg Ryan have developed a means of communication. She is an alcoholic, and as long as she maintains her alcoholism, then there's no problem in the relationship. One day she gets drunk and she is unable to take care of her daughter, and something almost happens to her daughter. I think she gets hurt, and she can't help her. And after that, of course, she goes to rehab and tries to get over it. And one of the problems in the movie is the fact that the dynamic is changing in the relationship between Meg Ryan and Andy Garcia, the husband and wife. The dynamic is changing because she's not the same person she was before. He wants her to be, not to be an alcoholic, but to have exactly the same personality she had before. And of course, there's a problem with communication. There's a problem with he has to take care. He is a fairly traditional individual, and he has to change the way that he functions, because now he has to take care of his daughter, and that's not something that is part of his culture. It's really kind of a fascinating movie to watch. I saw it a number of years ago. It's pretty painful to watch because of the dysfunctional communication that's taking place. Personal taste varies, and therapists should work with the films that clients prefer. Occasionally, clients will prefer films that the therapists do not. A failure to take into account a client's taste in films will result in poor adherence to watching schedules. They're not going to watch it if it's not a movie that they like. Assigning films that the clients don't prefer is like forcing them to learn a new tongue. The therapist's movie preferences, and that is the way it works. I'm definitely not a fan of the mafia. I'm not a fan of movies about organized crime. I've never seen The Godfather. You would have to almost force me to watch it, despite the fact that people say it's one of the best films ever made. But if I had a client that needed that type of information, then I would have to assign this movie and probably watch it myself so that I'd understand what they were talking about. Start with films that the client has already seen. They should talk openly about the movie, thus showing their preferences. The therapist should select a movie that is similar to the movie the client has described. The therapist should not overlook underlying themes for the major theme that they are trying to display. And this is a hint and a warning. If you are watching, or if you're going to use cinema therapy, then you need to watch the movie before you assign it. There may be something in there that will not really fit with what you're trying to, the point you're trying to get across to your client. So one of the things that you need to do, if you're going to assign a movie, you need to see it so that you can talk to your client about it. Discuss scenes that might be offensive, language, sex, nudity, and violence. Objections should lead to selecting an alternative film. The therapist should clarify the intent when assigning a film in which a client might mistake the role identification. The client should be advised to stop the film if they strongly dislike it. Now, Brokeback Mountain is potentially one of these movies that can be very controversial for people if they do not like, if they don't agree with homosexuality. Of course, there is homosexuality in this movie. People get embarrassed when they watch a gay romantic moment. So potentially, I've never seen the movie, so I can't say whether the language, the sex, if there's any nudity in the movie or any violence. I'm sure there's at least the assumption that there is sex. There is sex in Monsters Ball, so that it would be one of the things if you're trying to stay away from that aspect. If the person's too young, you certainly don't want them to see any sex acts. And of course, this is another case where that might be something that you need to think about before you assign this movie. Clients should be aware that their film suggestions are important and may be therapeutically more useful than those selected by the therapist. The films that the client likes the most may be unremarkable to the therapist. Any film that leads to a client opening up and revealing their true feelings is a good film. Anything that works. And this is a movie called Serenity. Serenity is the name of a spaceship that's Fillion. I can't think of his first name anyway. And that's Heather Glau, or I think that's Heather Glau. Anyway, she needs to escape, and she selects his ship as the one that she's going to use to escape on. And if somebody is a futurist type of, they enjoy futurist movies, this is of course one that is supposed to take place 400 years in the future. This would be a good movie to watch for them. If you would rather see historical fiction, you would have to assign this one anyway, and you would have to assign it because that would be the movie that they would want to watch. So there you go. Films are ideal metaphors for problem solving because they involve thesis, and antithesis, and synthesis. A character experiences a crisis, tries out several unsuccessful responses, and ultimately finds a resolution. Although films rarely provide exact solutions that clients can imitate in their own lives, they frequently act metaphorically to generate new approaches. And Back to the Future is an excellent example of a movie with a thesis. He's able to time travel, and there is an antithesis. They are trying to figure out how to get Marty McFly back to his own time, and of course there is a synthesis. They try different, or they have different ideas. He's a bit confused, but of course he has to convince the younger version of Doc Brown to work on a solution to his problem. And of course, eventually they do. They are able to think. Marty McFly, since he has gone into the future or into the past, is messing up what's going to happen in the future. So they need to resolve this problem before Marty destroys the future that he knows. Fascinating. Ideally, the client will identify with the main characters, test out options considered by the characters, and find points of agreement as well as disagreement with the resolutions. In follow-up discussions with the therapist will reinforce the experience by emphasizing the explicit impressions, by asking the client to describe the actions taken by the characters, and analyzing whether they are helpful or not. Now, this is really kind of fascinating because when I watch a movie, very often I will think about it not just after it's over with, but I'll try to analyze it and try to figure out what they did, what they could have done wrong, better, or what they might potentially have done wrong, and if this had happened, that was anyway. Snowpiercer is about a train. The Earth has become a frozen world, and Snowpiercer is a train that breaks through the ice and snow. And I'm not exactly sure what the movie's about. I didn't really look this one up, but I have seen advertisements for the movie. I'm not sure what the point is. The client should critically evaluate the decisions made by characters in a film because a movie protagonist's choices may not be the best for them. When the client begins to over-identify with a hero who throws caution to the wind, the therapist needs to celebrate the spirit while grounding the experience. And Truth or Dare is kind of one of those movies. It's about a group of individuals that go to Mexico and they become embroiled in a game of Truth or Dare that is not only worldwide, but it's also to the death, as strange as that may seem. And if you, since the rest of their life becomes a Truth or Dare, they always have to either tell the truth or they have to perform the dare. And throughout the movie, you're watching individuals falling by the wayside because they can't do that. And of course, whoever this character is one of the last people standing. And then it turns out that the Truth or Dare game has come out of a nun who was called forth a demon to protect her from a sadistic priest, as it turns out. And the game is perpetual. There's nothing you can do to get out of it. So and this character is really kind of interesting because I've never actually seen the movie, but I read the synopsis and it was like a page and a half long. But this character is really kind of interesting because this is the first time she's ever done anything like this. She was going to do something during spring break, and instead she joined her friends and went down to Mexico. She just tries to make people happy, and in the end, all of these individuals that she was down there with, they all drop off. They all die one by one because they can't handle what's going on, and they're not used to telling the truth, or they can't do anything about the dare. Like I said, she's like the last person standing. It's really kind of fascinating, but there's no way she can get out of the game. A client described in the text after watching Ruby in Paradise decided to quit her job and open a craft store. And Ruby, if I remember correctly, I didn't look this one up this time, but the last time I taught this class, I talked about Ruby in Paradise. Ruby is an individual. She's having a bad time. She decides to throw everything away and go down to Jamaica or one of the Caribbean islands. And while she's down there, she discovers that she really wants to do something. She's been a people pleaser all of her life, and now she's going to do what she wants to do. So she opens some kind of a kiosk on the beach, and she's in paradise and she's happy. Now that would be fine, except the lady that watched this took from the movie that she should throw out everything that her whole life, and she should open a craft store because she's always wanted to open a craft store. But that wasn't the message that the counselor was trying to make. So instead, he wanted her to watch the movie Rudy, which is a football movie about an individual that is small in stature. So what happens is, so the therapist had her compare her situation with that of Rudy, and not Ruby, but Rudy, and the football movie Rudy, who had multiple fallback plans. And if you've ever watched Rudy, this guy had plan after plan after plan because he wasn't the best student in the world, he wasn't the largest person in the world, but he wanted to play for Notre Dame. So he had all of these plans that needed to take place in order for him to succeed, and in order for him to get onto the field. So he had all these fallback plans. And of course, his dream was to play for Notre Dame. The client compromised by renting a booth at an arts and crafts cooperative rather than moving to paradise and opening a craft store. An indirect effect is the impression that a client takes from an incidental aspect of a film, an impression not dependent on the film's major theme. The effect lingers long after the client sees the film and may be out of proportion to its narrative intent because of the psychological needs of the client at the time of the viewing. And of course, there are lots of points to Avatar. Avatar is about an individual who's a quadriplegic, or maybe he's just a paraplegic, but he has to save whatever that place is. Avatar? Maybe it's called Avatar. I don't remember. He has to save it. He and the other female professor has to save it from the militaristic individuals that are trying to take over. Sometimes films are chosen not because they contain characters who are role models or their themes are similar to the client's problems, but because the film as a whole offers a healing experience, kind of like Stand and Deliver. Watching the film brings about a better frame of mind, a sense of being connected with the universe, and renewed hope. And of course, that's what happened. It is a poor high school in the Los Angeles area. These are Hispanic students. Edward James Olmos decides that he's going to teach them how to do calculus, and he gets a room full of individuals that he thinks can perform well, and he gets them to understand calculus. He's able to teach them calculus, even though in the beginning, of course, they can barely add and subtract, but he is able to get them to learn calculus. And they take the AP calculus test, and they're able to do very well on it. Everybody passes the test, and they think that they cheated because it's a poor school and they did better than anybody else. So it's an uplifting movie because eventually they take the test again and they do even better the second time with someone else as their monitor. The answer to many of life's problems can be found in the movies. The most therapeutic dilemma and the most challenging job of a therapist is to help a client out of denial. Helping them out of their denial can be very difficult and time extensive. This is one of the basic problems that we have in the world, is the fact that rather than facing the music or facing the truth, We would rather just deny that it's going to happen. Denial is the inability to see a situation or a life problem as it is affecting their lives and future. You stay in denial. And this is, of course, a movie that is about the world being in denial. Individuals, it was kind of like what happened with COVID and President Trump. He didn't want to admit, he thought that being reelected was more important than admitting that we had a medical crisis taking place. So he was in denial for the longest time. He kept saying that it was just like the flu, and that by the time summer came around, we'd all be, it would be gone. And the reality was that they needed to face it realistically, and we needed to do a lot more. I looked the figures up yesterday about COVID. 1/3 of all the COVID deaths worldwide occurred in the United States. And that's a really, really bad outcome. That's unconscionable. Somebody didn't do what they needed to do. Anyway, we were in denial, and we've done this before. Reagan did this during the AIDS epidemic. The AIDS epidemic hit at the end of the 1970s, beginning of the 1980s, and it took him until, when was it that he admitted that there was a problem? 85, 86. This thing had been going on for 5 or 6 years, and people just couldn't get him to admit that there was a problem because, well, they didn't want to. They didn't like it. I mean, it was dirty. It was nasty. It was killing gay men. There was a lot of denial out there. Anyway, so this is one of those kind of movies that tell you that you need to make sure that you're looking at the world realistically. Don't look up. And the reason they're telling people not to look up is because there is a meteor that's headed toward the Earth, and there's nothing they can do to stop it. But they needed to be, people needed to be aware. Therapist technique for helping a client out of denial is to use what the movie industry refers to as suspension of disbelief. Suspending one's disbelief comes about when a movie or book is so strong and real in its presentation that the viewer forgets that they are watching a story. And this is one of the things that happened in The Matrix. In The Matrix, what were they saying? Well, I don't really, I've only seen it once. Keanu Reeves, I can't remember what they called him in the movie, but Keanu Reeves' character is the only individual that can deal with a certain situation. The Matrix is the real world, and we're all blinded by the Matrix. It's like a computer program. If I'm getting all this wrong, you guys can tell me how stupid I am. But in order to save the world, they have to, I don't remember. Anyway, The Matrix. Suspension of disbelief. A therapist needs to get his clients to suspend their disbelief and accept the story in the film as real-life situations. Of course, you don't want to do that with The Matrix. Otherwise, you would assume that nothing is real and everything is an illusion. They may be able to see themselves, their family, or their friends in the characters in the film. Suspension of disbelief is the mirror image of denial. If a movie can bring out an emotional attachment to the stories and characters long enough, it can help a client deal with their own problems and issues. So one of the things that a film does is that it forces you to, if you can suspend your disbelief, if you can put yourself in the position of what's going on in the movie, then you can practice in your own mind how you would solve that problem. The Whistleblower is really kind of a fascinating movie. I've never actually seen it, but I read about it. It's all about trafficking, international trafficking. And Rachel Weisz's character is a police person that is hired by an international security agency to work in Bosnia Herzegovina. And what she discovers is that some of the bigwigs in the international community are financing trafficking of young women. And one of the organizations that's doing it is her own organization, or the one that has hired her. And so what she is doing is trying to save as many women as possible, and to bring this this travesty of international law out. It's really kind of a fascinating movie. It's kind of an older movie. It's about 20 years old, 25 years old. But it's called The Whistleblower, and it's about human sexual trafficking. Some therapists have found that clients can move more rapidly through the denial stage of their treatment when they use movies to bring themselves out of denial. People tend to the opposite of what they see and experience. With movies, people learn what they should do in life by watching the opposite. They learn what to do by seeing the wrong way of doing things. This is a movie, 12 Years a Slave, is an actual account of an individual who went down to Washington, D.C. Now, Washington, D.C. is actually between Maryland and Virginia. And since those two were slave states, and this individual went down he was a violinist, and he went down to D.C. to play in a concert, and while he was down there, he was stolen. I used to live in what was the name? Washington Heights in Maryland, and Washington Heights is right beside one of the largest plantations in Maryland, where they actually bred slaves. The slave trading area in Washington, D.C. was one of the largest in the South, as strange as that may seem, even though this was the nation's capital. So what happened was, when he went down there, he was shanghaied. He was captured, and he was sold into slavery. And because he kept denying it, they kept selling him farther and farther south, until he eventually ended up in New Orleans. They sold him that far south. They sold him to somebody in North Carolina, then they sold him to somebody in Georgia, then they sold him to somebody in Alabama, and then to New Orleans. And he had trouble all the way through. Anyway, and this is a true story. This is actually a true story. 12 Years a Slave. He was a free man, but he was sold into slavery because he was black. One of the goals of films and therapy is to use the movies to unlock the doors in the client's memories, the doors that have been sealed shut for one reason or another. And usually we seal these doors. One reason is because it happened in our childhood. It happened when we couldn't deal with it, so we have locked it away. Another is that it was so traumatic in the present that we don't want to talk about it. And that was the case with Thank You for Your Service, which is a movie about an individual who served a tour in Afghanistan and is now trying to get over his PTSD, along with some of the people that he served with. The movies can unlock the doors to some of the memories that might have been trying to process as dreams. Watching a movie that helps the clients deal with the healing may be perpetuated by a dream that creates a continuation of the healing process. And a lot of times this is what happens, thank goodness. The healing process starts by bringing it to the fore, bringing it out of the opening that door and bringing it out and talking about it and dealing with it. And then the dreams that the individual has will continue to heal the healing process. And that's what happened in this movie. As soon as he started dealing with his PTSD, then he started recovering from his PTSD. While he was keeping it all locked up, he was having problems in his home life. He was having problems at work. But as soon as he started talking to his friends about what was going on, and to his wife, then she understood, and they were able to help him. And of course, one of the characters in the movie commits suicide because they can't deal with it. They can't deal with the problem. They need to deal with the problem. Movies may help the client put to rest conflicting feelings that they have been carrying around for years. Clients will sometimes try to drown the weight of the feelings in alcohol, hide them behind indiscriminate sex, or curb them with fatigue of a workaholic. Movies can sometimes free the client to heal, and dreams from the movie and healing add to the process. This is Rabbit Hole. This is about a family, husband and wife, who lose their son. He gets hit by a car, and it's about the grief process that needs to take place. And how they're not dealing with it, how she's not dealing with it. She gets rid of all the pictures of her son, and she gets accused by her husband as trying to forget him. He asks her if she wants to have another child, and she denies it. She doesn't want it because she's afraid the same thing will happen. Eventually, of course, they reconcile, and they deal with their grief. Men's and women's issues are the most recurring themes in therapy, and if you don't believe that, then yeah, look, that's it. We could pretend that therapy is all about anxiety and it's all about depression, but usually the anxiety and depression, a lot of times the anxiety and the depression have to do with problems between men and women. It's just the way the world works. There's nothing you can do about it. It's life. He never listens to me. It's like talking to a brick wall. We used to have sex all the time. Since we started living together, I might as well be a celibate. She won't do anything around the house. I'm getting tired of all this. The reason I have Blue Valentine up here is because it's that kind of a movie. It's about two individuals who probably shouldn't have gotten married anyway. He's a bum and she's a nurse. She gets pregnant by somebody else before they get married. So she has a child. They're trying to reconcile. He still won't work. She's working as a nurse. The doctor starts to hit on her. He gets mad. It's just a mess. She tries to go back to her family, to her mother and father. He follows her. It's really quite a mess. And the reality is that's the way life is. Life is pretty messy between men and women if they can't communicate. And that's usually the problem, is the fact that they won't talk to each other. They start adding things up. They get angry. They won't talk. Anyway. Looking at the research done on the efficacy of cinema therapy, we can see that there was a wave of cinema therapy use in the United States at the end of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century, but less discussion about it in the 2010s and 2020s. There may be many reasons for this, from fear of a new technique to the inability to grasp the concept. And this is one of the reasons why we have a cinema therapy class. Sometime 20 years ago, whoever was teaching psychology decided that cinema therapy was a way to go. It was a brand new means of therapy. It looked good. We were renting movies at Redbox and at Blockbuster. Neither one of the, I guess Redbox still exists. Nobody has a CD player anymore or a DVD player, but hey, it made a lot of sense for the end of the 20th century, beginning of the 21st century. What's the movie? State and Maine is about a movie company that's trying to finish a movie, and they have to go from one town to the other because they get kicked out of the town. I can't remember why they got kicked out of the town. The star of the movie head is chases underage girls. So they get chased out of New Hampshire and they go to Vermont. Really kind of and it's about them trying to finish the movie. Okay, so let's look at some research on cinema therapy. This is research done by Sharp, Smith, and Cole in 2002. Cinema therapy, metaphorically promoting therapeutic change. It was in the Counseling Psychology Quarterly. And there is the DOI number if you need to look it up. Sharp and her colleagues seem to be very careful about suggesting that cinema therapy works, and in fact complain that the paucity of research on the topic and suggest increased research in the future. Emphasizing the word metaphor, the authors suggest that using film as a metaphor allows the client to experience the feelings of the film without the interference of intellect and analysis. The example they give is interesting. Abby is a 15-year-old girl that the parents think might be getting sexually active with her boyfriend. Neither the parents or Abby feel comfortable talking about sex, so the therapist assigns the movie For Keeps, a movie about a pregnancy with a teen couple for the family to watch. In the follow-up session, the parents are able to discuss their fear of Abby getting pregnant and the consequences. All parties are able to discuss sex through the characters in the movie, which is what they needed. They need to discuss the problem. And of course, since nobody can talk about sex, that nobody wants to say anything. But finally, after watching the movie, instead of discussing Abby, the 15-year-old girl, they can discuss whoever the character was in the movie, as if, and get the same points out as they would have if they were able to actually talk about sex. Dumarsh, this is research that was done in 2014. This is out of Romania. The effects of cinema therapy group on diminishing anxiety in young people. This is out of Romania. I have another research article out of Italy. So this is used overseas. This is used by people in Eastern and Southern Europe. So let's see what Dumarsh has to say. This research comes out of Romania, as I said. Dumarsh in 2014 took 60 subjects between the ages of 19 and 22 and divided them into 30 in the control group and 30 in the experimental group. She measured the anxiety levels of all the subjects. With the experimental group, Dumarsh showed weekly sessions of movies that were based on existential and relational problematic nucleus. The movies covered the following topics: childhood and family universe, couple relationships, social relationships, adjustment, maladjustment, exclusion, discrimination, justice, equality, morality, responsibility, relationship with oneself, themes of personal development and death, self-knowledge and spiritual interests, relation between natural, artificial, normal, supernatural, paranormal, topics regarding the existential meaning. Now, Romania is kind of interesting because Romania has several different ethnic groups in Romania, and this is just one of them. There are 5 major ethnic groups. One of them being the Roma or the Romani, the people that used to be called gypsies. I guess that would be hence the name Romania. Anyway, and this is one of the ethnic groups here. I didn't show you all 5 ethnic groups because, well, I don't have enough room. I decided not to. While the anxiety level of the control group tested basically the same both during the initial testing and after 3 months, the experimental group tested significantly lower after 3 months of cinema therapy. Dumarche, 2014, found that the group was highly receptive to this work method by means of movies. The participants explored their inner universe by identifying themselves with some characters or due to the central themes offered by the movie. Thus, they re-signified their personal universe, they restructured and transformed their own life script. And that is according to Dumarche in 2014. So it worked. Kusum Dewey and Julian Tika, the effectiveness of cinema therapy to improve student empathy. This is out of Advances in Social Science, Education, and Humanities Research. This is out in Indonesia. This research was done, well, it was done in Indonesia. They wanted to see if cinema therapy would raise the empathy level of students with low empathy. The subjects were 9. There were 9 15 to 16-year-old students who scored low on an empathy scale in a pre-test situation. Indonesia is the most populous Muslim country in the world and maintains a strong collectivistic society. The research was conducted at a high school with a Western curriculum. Cinema therapy was conducted in 5 sessions using films that emphasized the following attributes: empathizing with others, caring for others, solidarity with friends, cooperating with others, helping others. After the therapy, the students were given a post-test. Remember, there were 9 of them, right? Yeah, there were 9. After the cinema therapy, the students were given the post-test measuring their empathy level, and the group averaged an increased score of 22.4, with the lowest increasing 17 points and the highest increasing 28 points. Discussions after the film showed that the students felt empathy for the fictitious characters, and this transferred to an increased empathy score post-therapy. And this is one of the movies that they showed, The Mirror Never Lies, and the other one was Laskar Pelangi. And those were both Indonesian language films. This is research. Oh, I left out my ampersand. Sacalato, Salvato, Villa, Salvi, and Bottini. Through the Looking Glass, a scoping review of cinema and video therapy. This is from Frontiers in Psychology. This is out of Italy. This is a meta-analysis looking at 38 studies dealing with cinema and video therapy from Italy. Criteria for eligibility included research article, had to be a research article, use of complex visual stimuli, including video, film, or documentary, application of the techniques on psychological or physical difficulties, and it had to be in the English language. There were 184 that were initially identified, but only 148 were disqualified for not meeting one of the 4 parameters of the study. So they were only looking at 38 different studies. And this is Sacalato. That's one of the researchers. This is the second guy, Salvato. 38 studies published between 1974 and 2018 were included in the study. Remember, these are studies done in Italy. 7 used classical cinema therapy, 9 used a video modeling approach, and 5 applied video peer modeling, and we're going to explain these in just a second. 11 out of the 38 used a generic video treatment. And that's the next author, Villa. Traditional cinema therapy can be defined as a therapeutic technique in which the therapist selects commercial films and asks the client to see them alone or with specific other people, for example, family members. The therapist chooses some films that relate to the patient's difficulties and after a viewing session discusses with the patient the main themes that emerge from the movie. So who's the next author? Wait a minute. It's Salvi. Salvi and then Bottini. There's Salvi. That was tough finding her picture, let me tell you. Traditional cinema therapy was found in the following research by Turley and Durden in 1990, Heston and Kottman in 1997, Bierman et al. In 2003, Marsick in 2010, Garmaglia et al. In 2011, Ballard in 2012, and Egechi and Ginkaz in 2017. So here comes Bottini. There she is. The video modeling technique exposes clients to videos in which characters manifest specific skills that the client needs to learn. For example, learning how to interact with other people successfully. At the end of the video, the client can practice what they learned from the character. Video modeling is often combined with other types of therapy. Video modeling is often used with autism spectrum disorder. Video modeling was found in the following research: Charlop and Milstein in 1989, Reeve et al. In 2007, Scottoni in 2008, Coughlin et al. In 2009, Jones et al. In 2014, Koppel et al. In 2015, McPherson et al. In 2015, Von Maffei et al. In 2015, and Walsh et al. In 2018. These are obviously mostly from the United States. Humor has been used in cinema therapy by several researchers. Kamada in 2007 and 2008 screened humorous films for patients suffering from atopic dermatitis and other manifestations of this stress-related illness, and that's exactly what atopic dermatitis looks like. Comic films reduce stress, reducing estradiol levels, which improve their symptoms. Gelkoff et al. In 2006 showed humorous films to patients suffering from schizophrenia, 5 days a week for 3 months. Results showed a reduction of depression and anxiety levels. Golan et al. In 2010 and Yan et al. In 2018 were able to teach children with autism spectrum disorder to recognize 15 target emotions by showing cartoons of Thomas and Friends. The depictions are trains with human faces. If you've ever seen Thomas, this is one of my grandson's favorite cartoons, Thomas. It's a cartoon out of England. Cinema therapy and video modeling can treat various psychological difficulties and particular conditions in healthy and pathological populations. Marsick in 2010 improved the understanding of the feelings of children of parental divorce by watching films about separation and divorce. Bierman et al. In 2003 showed that people preferred films conceived for their age and historical period. The study used cinema therapy to treat young girls with legal and family problems, demonstrating enhanced compliance, cooperation, and understanding of their family problems. Cinema therapy and video modeling were shown to work with the following pathologies: autism spectrum disorder, addiction, anxiety or schizophrenia, anxiety, dementia, anorexia nervosa, and learning disabilities. And the reason I have Little Miss Perfect up here is because this is a movie about an individual who is a bit obsessive compulsive, and she develops anorexia nervosa because she gets online and she starts interacting with a website that accepts eating disorders, that promotes eating disorders, as weird as that may seem. And that is the end of the lecture. So cinema therapy has been shown to work in Europe. Can work in the United States. We are not so involved with other things that we can't watch television or movies anymore. So it's just an idea. This is like I said before, it's an arrow for your quiver of therapy techniques. If you can come up with a list of good cinema therapy. So I'll talk to you next week. This next week will be the last week we talk about cinema therapy. And the next week we're going to start talking about social media. The week after next. Next week is the 5th week, and then the 6th week we'll start talking about Adam Alter's Irresistible, a book.